Well, switching gears completely, the 12 steps of AA. Been going through the 12 steps from a New Testament point of view, kind of marrying the steps with Jesus' teaching, which brings out just so much more richness and depth. And also for those of us who are not alcoholics or substance abusers, the realization that we're all recovering from something is huge. We have to realize that. I get pushback from that when I say that, believe me. But to realize that we're all recovering from something, that we all have unresolved bits down there, and some of us have a lot of it. And sometimes we don't even realize it because it's unconscious, of course. But to be able to have an actual ritual cycle that we can work through, that's what the steps represent. Actual concrete things and steps that we can take and things and activities and things that we can do to help us to work through the resolution. That's what this is all about. But that's what Jesus' way is all about, right? That's what therapy is all about. I mean, the human journey from psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually is the human journey. And you can look at it from a lot of different angles, but it's the same journey, only one journey. It's just as Jesus said, I am the way. This is the only way back to the Father because it's the only way back to presence. It's the only way back to the freedom of being free from our core beliefs, being free from those unconscious programs. Every Sunday that we take another step, and we're up to step 8 this morning, I'd like to be able to go back a little bit and just kind of look at the steps from a 30,000-foot view because it's so important to be able to understand where we are in the cycle. You know, like one of those maps you see on the wall, you are here. That's where you are here. So where are we? Our very good friend and ex-associate pastor, Frank Billman, who was, I know some of you remember him, happily over ensconced in Texas now. He had a way of looking at the steps that I thought was good and takes it from a little bit different point of view. He said the first 9 steps are looking at, first of all, it's all about restoring relationships, the first 9 steps. And the first 3 are restoring relationships with God, the relationship that we have with God. The next 4 are restoring our relationship with ourselves. And then the next 2 are restoring our relationship with others. And I thought that's a pretty good way to look at it. The restoring of relationships, but in 3 different areas. So how does that work? Well, when we're restoring our relationship with God in terms of the first 3 steps, what we're doing is we're developing our own awareness and also getting to the place of acceptance of our personal powerlessness. Because as long as we think we're actually running the show, as long as we think that we can do everything we need to do under our own steam, under our own power, you know, we're just going to be kidding ourselves, first of all, but banging our head against the wall. So to admit and accept and become aware of our own personal powerlessness, and then to submit to the power that's greater than ourselves. And that's both human and divine. We can submit to God. We say we submit to God. But if we can't submit to each other, and those that are especially trying to look out for ourselves when we're in a difficult place, then how in the world do we think that we're submitting to God? Just as James said, anyone who hates his brother, says he loves God and hates his brother is a liar. It's the same thing here. We show our submission to God and his greater power over us by actually listening to the people around us, taking some advice for a change. And of course, all this boils down to humility. So the first 3 steps are allowing us to be humble, which means that we can see the relationship that we have with God as it actually is, and not as we imagine it to be. How about when we're relating to ourselves and trying to restore a relationship to ourselves? What does that even mean, to restore your relationship with yourself, right? Are we talking about loving ourselves? Are we talking about self-esteem? You know, a lot of times you're hearing people say, you got to say affirmations. You know, say affirmations to yourself. Say them in the mirror. You know, tell yourself what a great person you are. How good you look today, even if you have 2 different shoes on. Yeah. But if we're doing something like that, we're doing it backward. Because self-esteem and this self-love that we talk about all the time is not the cause, you know, it's the effect. It's not the cause of us finding meaning and purpose in life. It's the effect, or it's the byproduct of simply living meaningful and purposeful lives. That's the way it works. We have to get out and actually do something. And then we start to understand who we really are and how we can love ourselves. And how do we actually love ourselves? How does that even work? I thought C.S. Lewis said it perfectly in Mere Christianity. He was talking about loving your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. He says, well, how do I love myself? I mean, I don't feel any sentimentality to myself or affection for myself. He said, but I do clothe myself, and I feed myself, and I shelter myself, and I educate myself. That's how I love myself, as I love my neighbor, by taking care of those needs, by caring enough to take care of those needs. And then Thomas Merton beautifully said, as he defined love itself, not as a feeling and not as a behavior even, but love as simple identification with the beloved. When we feel so identified with, connected with, one with another person or with God, to the point that we don't know where we end and they begin, then everything that we do for them is as if we did it for ourselves and vice versa. So the behavior flows out of the intense connection, the identification with, seeing another fellow human being, flawed, broken, but fellow human being. And when we can connect and when we can relate, then everything begins to flow. So when we can identify with our true self, not the ego self, not the small self that we've been relating to all our lives, listening to that voice that talks to us in our head, when we start to identify with our true self, that's when we can actually love ourselves as we would love our neighbor, as God loves us. Because it's not the ego or the small self that we want to relate to, because really that's only the sum of our behavior and thought patterns, that ego self. It's the roles that we play, it's the attributes that we have, it's the accomplishments that we make. If we're just relating to all of that, that's transitory. And that's always going to keep us from being able to truly love and relate to ourselves. What we're trying to do here is restore the relationship we have with that true self. And so that's what steps 4 through 7 do for us. They help us to distinguish between simple behavior and our true self. And most importantly, those steps can rescue us from shame. Shame is huge. Shame is a misapplication of our behavior onto ourselves. It doesn't belong there. We are something different than that. And to try to drive that point home, do y'all remember, anybody remember Father Flanagan? Father Flanagan. Now you might remember the movie Boys Town. How many have seen the movie Boys Town with Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney? Spencer Tracy was portraying Father Flanagan, and Father Flanagan was an Irish-born Catholic diocesan priest who emigrated to the United States, became a United States citizen, and he was born like in 1886 and lived until 1941, was it? 48? Anyway, he was only like 61 years old when he died. But in 1917, he established Boys Town, and what it was a home for homeless boys. And he had a very specific way of understanding rearing children. And when he looked at the way that boys were being handled, especially those that were homeless and then got into trouble and they went into reform school and everything was punitive. I mean, back then, right, in the early aughts, it was really punitive. And he was trying to work against that. And he had a whole different way of approaching these boys with respect and with dignity and with love. In fact, this Boys Town grew to this large complex where they actually had one boy who would be elected mayor by his peers. And they were self-governing, to the extent that they could do that. And then they had the dormitories, they had the schools, they had a post office, they had a chapel, they had a gym, they had all these things. So here was this almost a self-contained city out there, 10 miles west of Omaha, Nebraska. And so then in 1938, the movie was made, and then he became hot property. Everybody knew him, and he continued to do his work. And so Father Edward Flanagan for many years carried on a public dialogue after this movie came out, and he has a higher profile, dealing with his revolutionary views on child care issues through speaking engagements and radio broadcasts and newspaper editorials, magazine articles, and personal correspondence. These following famous sayings are the ones that I wanted to get to, and they just comprise a small portion of his writings. But here was his main premise. There are no bad boys. There are no bad boys. There are no bad girls. There is only bad environment, bad training, bad example, bad thinking. There is nothing the matter with our growing boys that love, proper training, and guidance will not remedy. It costs so little to teach a child to love and so much to teach him to hate. I have yet to find a single boy who wants to be bad. I do not believe that a child can be reformed by lock and key and bars, or that fear can ever develop a child's character. Rehabilitation needs greater emphasis. Punishment, less. A boy or girl given the proper guidance and direction, kept busy and constructively occupied during their leisure or free time, will prove my statement that there is no such thing as a bad boy or a bad girl. Imagine how revolutionary this was. I mean, you had this flying in the face. You know, children were basically property back in the 19th and earliest 20th century. And then you had Dr. Spock in the 40s come through with his very, very lenient, probably went too far. But these were the competing voices to the culture and the way it was with dealing with children. But notice the difference that's being made by the true self, the boy or the girl, him or herself, and the behavior. The behavior is not the person. Shame is not part of this. Correction, of course, and discipline is. Guilt can be a great motivator to get person back on the right track. But to be rescued from shame is a huge piece of what we're talking about here. Finally, he says, I know when the idea of a boys' home grew in my mind. I never thought of anything remarkable about taking in all of the races and all of the creeds. So even though he is Catholic, he's taking everybody in, all the boys that needed help. To me, they are all God's children. They are my brothers. They are children of God. I must protect them to the best of my ability. Without God at the beginning, there can be only confusion at the end. I think we need more Father Flanagans. You know, in 2012, the Catholic Church has started the process of canonizing him. And so he's on the road to sainthood at this point. But you have to understand how controversial this was in the 20s and the 40s. You know, this idea that there are no bad boys or bad girls, that we are not the sum of our behavior. That's not who we are. That's not who we are. And those of us who have been through real rehab for substance abuse or alcoholism, drug addiction, and you have this trail of wreckage behind you, how hard is it to separate that behavior from who you are? And how much shame are you carrying around? This is what steps 4 and through 7 are trying to get us to understand. The environment, the bad training, the example that we've had from others covers up who we really are. And so restoring our relationship with ourselves means that we are unidentifying with the ego, unidentifying with the ego's behavior, with the ego's thought patterns, and re-identifying with who we actually are. Steps 4 through 7 are the process for doing just that. Taking these character defects versus who we really are. So that's for self. Now, steps 8 through 9 are going to restore our relationship with others by re-identifying and connecting ourselves with others. So let's read step 8. It's on your inserts if you've got those. Step 8, made a list of persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Simple. Made a list of persons that we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And then step 9 is to make those direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And we'll talk about that next week. But getting back to step 8, yeah, we're making another list here, just like we did with step 4, but it's way past the list. What's really going on here is that step 8 is recognizing our complete interconnectedness with each other. We are so connected. It is vital that we heal and restore these relationships with others to the extent that we can, at least within ourselves. to leave no stone unturned to restoring those relationships. Because here's the key. Our healing, our own healing, from whatever it happens to be, is not possible in isolation. Our healing is always going to take place in connection with each other and, of course, with God and God's Spirit. I had an image in my mind about this, and you probably have all experienced this or maybe seen a movie where rain is just beginning to fall on a very still pond. Maybe it's a pool, but the water is like a glass sheet, and the first drop hits. And splashes, and the rings go out, and then another drop over here, and the rings go out, and then the two intersect, and then another one over here, and another one here, and the rain is accelerating as it's going, and all those rings are extending out, crossing each other, creating all these shapes until it gets so confused, and the rain is hard enough that the whole surface of the water is just vibrating. It's vibrating. You seen that before? You got that in your mind? That vibrating surface. Think of it as a metaphor for our lives. All of us live in overlapping ripples with everyone that's around us. Here in this room, every one of you is like a drop in the water where the ripples are extending out, and they're overlapping with the person next to you and the one over, and so that the whole surface becomes a vibration. We live in these overlapping ripples of each other's choices, of each other's behavior. Whether that's a blast zone or a comfort zone, we are living that. It's just by proximity. When someone makes a choice, if we're close enough, we're going to be affected by that choice. That ripple is going to come our way. And then our choice is going to ripple back and create this milieu, right? This is what we're talking about. This is how all of this really works. I wanted to read a little bit from John Donne, one of my favorite poets, and of course he's 17th century. But this is a very famous one, and I'm sure you've heard it before, at least the last line. All mankind is of one author and is one volume. When one man dies, one chapter is not torn out of the book, but translated into a better language. And every chapter must be so translated. As therefore, the bell that rings to a sermon calls not upon the preacher only, but upon the congregation to come. So this bell calls us all. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Love that. We're all part of a greater whole. We're all connected. We cannot be separated. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can separate us from each other except in our minds. And all our ripples, all our choices affect everyone around us in the moment. But depending on a relationship, it can be for years to come. It could be for life, especially in the case of a child. This is what we're talking about. There are no bad boys or girls, but our ripples, the choices that we make, can alter another person's ego perception, can change their core beliefs, what they believe down deep unconsciously, and that changes their behavior. And that's what Father Flanagan is talking about. And because of all this, there are two parts to step 8. Take a look at the first part. We're going to make a list. All right. We're going to make a list of those people that were harmed. We got to go back and we got to think about it. That's a good thing. Kind of retrace, life review, see how what we chose to do and the things that we didn't even choose to do, that just the compulsions and the obsessions took us, identify those broken relationships. And then we're going to start building awareness as we do that of our interconnectedness. Often we go through life and we don't even think about how the choices we make affect others. It doesn't even occur to us to think that way. We're so oblivious. We got our blinders on. We're just moving through. But if we stop and we actually take a life review like this, we think about the people we hurt, that's going to shine a spotlight on how we're all connected and the effect of the ripples that we are creating as we go through life. Our choices and our actions do affect others, not just ourselves. And most importantly, we'll begin to realize that we can't go forward. We can't heal the things that need healing in our life without clearing the wreckage of the past. Got to do that. Because the wreckage of the past is going to contain those unresolved past belief systems, those programs that we put in place. And those unresolved issues affect our present and continue to affect our present. They create a glass ceiling over our heads. This is as far as we can go and no further. I remember, again, what was this, 35 years ago when I was in pastoral training in an evangelical church. The pastors who were instructing me and mentoring me and teaching me, one of them had me do exactly this. I had no idea. The steps of AA weren't even a twinkle in my eye back then. No idea. But said, hey, you got to make a list of all the people that you've hurt. And then you got to call them, and seek forgiveness is the way that he put it. And I had no idea. Okay, I'm just doing what I'm told here, But it really was an interesting exercise. I mean, I remember even all the way back then to go back and think about the people that I had hurt. And I was only in my early 30s, so I didn't have as much time to hurt people as I have by now. But there were still a few, of course. And as I was going through the process, who have I hurt and who do I need to call and seek forgiveness of? I realized, at the time, I probably didn't think it this way, but as I think back on it, it was a tricky process. Because most of the people that I had hurt, maybe all the people I hurt, usually hurt me back, right? It was a two-way street. And it was real easy for me to sit there and justify my actions and justify myself. Well, I did that, but they did this, right? And you can let yourself off the hook if you start to think about it in these ways, by clinging to your own victimhood, right? By clinging to your own resentments. And so it's a difficult process as you go through this to really just let all that go and look at the people that you have harmed. Which brings us to the second part. We're supposed to become willing to make amends. We're not making the amends yet. We just got to become willing to make the amends. That's a difficult process in itself. And this is way beyond just a mere transaction. I don't know what you think amends are. When you need to go back and you need to pay them back for the money that you stole, or you need to do this. It's not just a transaction we're talking about in terms of these amends. And it's not just asking for forgiveness either. But it is truly about forgiveness. What we're talking about here in this process is getting to a place of forgiveness. But we need to properly understand what forgiveness really is, because we, again, typically think of forgiveness as an apology extended and received, maybe restoration, maybe some sort of restitution. All those things is what we typically think about as forgiveness. And usually it also includes somehow, at least tacitly, condoning the action, the perpetration on yourself, which we are not doing in forgiveness. We're not condoning the action. The action is still just as wrong as it ever was. But what forgiveness really is, and when the light went on for me, was when I translated it from the original Hebrew and Aramaic of the Bible and realized that freedom and forgiveness share the same root word in both those languages. And so they're related by concept. To be forgiven is to be set free. To be set free is to be forgiven. And you can use those terms interchangeably. To forgive a debt was to be set free. That's the way they understood. To be healed from an illness that was keeping you down was to be set free. To be released from prison was to be set free. These were all images of forgiveness to the Semitic mind. And so if we understand it from that point of view, then we realize that we are becoming free. We are setting ourselves free from the victimization and from the resentment that we might have felt from the very people that we victimized, who resent us. And this is a prerequisite to anything that goes any further on these steps. We need to be able to hit this place of forgiveness as freedom, freeing ourselves from the unresolved issues of the past. Because we're not going to be able to see the harm that we've created in others until we remove the harm done to us in our own hearts. We have to resolve our own victimhood. Again, how? By identifying with the broken humanity that caused it in the first place. That we can see ourselves as also broken, as also flawed. And what is this harm we're talking about anyway? What is this harm that we've done? Well, we need to define it, or again, we're going to minimize it, and we're going to justify it, we're going to wiggle off our own hook. You know, it's like a little kid doing confession back in the Catholic Church, trying to think of something that they did wrong. I always remember trying to think of something because, I was only 10. I didn't have that much past to go through, so lie, cheat, steal. Sometimes you just make stuff up and just say it, so you can get your penance and go sit at the communion rail. But when we do that, when we focus on the big and the obvious sins, it's going to minimize and miss the point that this is trying to make. I wanted to read just a little bit from the 12 and 12. This is the commentary, AA's commentary on the steps. And I think they nail it really well here in terms of what this harm is that we're looking at in step 8. We might next ask ourselves what we mean when we say we have harmed other people. What kinds of harm do people do to one another anyway? To define the word harm in a practical way, we might call it the result of instincts in collision. Oh, I like that. Instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. If our tempers are consistently bad, we arouse anger in others. If we lie or cheat, we deprive others not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind. We really issue them an invitation to become contemptuous and vengeful. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, and a strong desire to retaliate in kind. Such gross misbehavior is not by any means a full catalog of the harms that we do. Let us think of some of the subtler ones, which can sometimes be quite as damaging. Suppose that in our family lives we happen to be miserly, irresponsible, callous, or cold. Suppose that we are irritable, critical, impatient, and humorless. Suppose we lavish attention upon one member of the family and neglect the others. What happens when we try to dominate the whole family, either by a rule of iron or a constant outpouring of minutiae and directions for just how their lives should be lived from hour to hour? What happens when we wallow in depression, self-pity, oozing from every pore, and inflict that upon those about us? Such a roster of harms done others, the kind that make daily living with us as practicing alcoholics difficult and often unbearable, could be extended almost indefinitely. When we take such personality traits as these into shop, office, and the society of our fellows, they can do damage almost as extensive as that we have caused at home. So it's really anything, no matter how small, that isolates us from each other, that separates us, degrades the connection between us, damages the relationship. All of that is the harm that we're talking about. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be small, but if it damaged the relationship, then that's what we're talking about here. And I love the symbolism of numbers because I just think it brings a point to things, and the symbolism is written right into the Hebrew Bible that we follow. But the number 7 means spiritual perfection. And the idea here is that there are 6 earthly directions, right? Forward and backward, side to side, up and down. So the 7th one represents spiritual perfection. And then 8, the number after 7, represents rebirth. So you get to spiritual perfection, and then there is a rebirth. These first 7 steps that we're talking about here are the completion of a radical change of our mind and heart. When we go through the first 3 steps that deal with restoring our relationship with God, and the next 4 steps that restore a relationship with our true self, we have undergone a radical change of mind and heart, a kind of completion. And so step 8 becomes a rebirth. The 12 and 12 calls the eighth step the beginning of the end of isolation from our fellows and from God. Did you hear that? The beginning of the end of our isolation from our fellows and from God. That's perfect. That's the rebirth. Everything that we have been doing before was further isolating us. Now, with this change of mind and heart, we have begun the process of ending our isolation, our disconnection from everyone else. Which brings us to a question. What is the purpose of life? Why are we here breathing on this planet? Is it about love? Is it about salvation? Those are good answers, right? Is it about service? Well, if I was reading from the Baltimore Catechism, as I was as a first grader in Catholic school, our purpose here is to glorify God. Also not a bad answer if we start to understand what glorifying God really means. Not just running around shouting praises all the time, but actually mirroring who God is. That's how we glorify God. So if God is love, and love is identification with the beloved, right? Oneness with the beloved, then what does that make our purpose? Our purpose is to learn oneness here. To learn and value connection here over everything else. To subordinate all our choices and everything else that we do to that oneness, to preserving that connection. That's our purpose here. And how do we do that? We do that by losing our sense of self. That our sense of self is even subordinated to the connection that we have with God's presence and everyone else. The first time that this really hit me, again, I'm going back 3 decades here, but I was going to work really early. I had to go in and get something done, so it was still completely pitch black. And I got to the parking lot of the office building. I had a key. And before I went in, though, I just opened my Bible to John 17. I don't know if it just fell open to John 17 or if I had purpose to read that. Anyway, I find myself sitting in my car in the dark reading John 17, and I don't know if you've had the experience where suddenly you read a passage and it just rockets off. I mean, to hear those words at that moment, it was like I hadn't heard them ever before, and everything was making so much sense to me. Through the funnel, through the lens of John 17. And I can tell you I've read it since and it hasn't had that same effect. But that moment was so life-altering for me. It made such a difference. And so I want to read just a little bit of what I read that morning and see how this relates to what we're talking about here. Jesus at John 17, starting at verse 20, I do not ask for these only. This is at the context is Jesus at the Lord's Supper. Right? He's talking about his friends here sitting around the table, laying around the table with him, right? I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. That's all of us, right? That they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you. That they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I in them, and you in me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them even as you loved me. See, I don't know how that's hitting you right now. Hit me like a freight train that morning. And what this boils down to is that all the spiritual work we do, all the emotional work, all the psychological work we do, it's basically just to create that oneness, to create that connection, to take everything out of the way that separates us one from another. All that dysfunctional stuff that creates the walls. This is what our work is about. It's about literally finding God's will, which is not a what. You've heard my rant before on this, I know. God's will is not a what. It's not the detail of what we do, the choices we make. It's not about those behavior points. We want it to be there because we want God to tell us exactly what to do so we won't fall in a ditch, right? We want an ironclad insurance policy. But what God's really is the how. The how of living in unity. The how of what we call love as identification with each other in all our relationships. If we live the how Any what will do. We obsess over God telling me what to do. God doesn't care what we do. He cares how we do what we do, because that's what puts us in the center of his will. And the Hebrew word for all of this, surprisingly, is shalom. Shalama in Aramaic. But we all know shalom as peace, right? But it's also a greeting, just like aloha. For coming and going, you say shalom. Why would you use shalom as a greeting? It doesn't mean simply peace, as in non-conflict. It means much more than that. Again, the word roots point to be fulfilled, to be completed, to be surrendered, to be delivered. Shalom is the greatest possible wholeness and health and prosperity and unity. In other words, shalom is our purpose as human beings. It's everything. Now you know why you greet it to another person as you're coming and going. Any diminishment of shalom, any diminishment of unity was understood as hataha. Hataha is sin. And we even know from hamartia in the Greek that means missing the mark. It was an archery term, right? Missing the center, missing the bullseye. Hataha is the same. It means missing the mark. Missing the mark of what? Missing the mark of God's perfect unity. Anything less than that is hataha. So step 8 is the beginning of the end of isolation. It's the beginning of the end of hataha, which is the isolation, the separation that is missing the mark of God's shalom. But step 8 is the beginning of shalom, the beginning of that wholeness, that connection for us and for others. And so what's the process? What's the process of shalom that we're talking about here in these steps? First of all, we got to dig deep. If we're going to make that list of people we've harmed, and if we're going to cut beneath our self-justification, we got to dig deep. We're going to have to scrape away the scabs. Lovely image, right? We're going to have to ruthlessly trace the swath of our destruction through our past. Be willing to look at all of that, and then be willing to do whatever is needed to restore shalom as much as we possibly can, at least inside, from inside to outside. We're never going to be able to control what the other does with our amends, with our apology, with our restitution. They still may be living in unforgiveness. That's now on them. We've done everything that we can do. But to be willing to do everything from the inside out that's needed for shalom, to build our awareness, to build our forgiveness, that interior freedom, that we are no longer living under the victimization, and then to make those amends, not just as a transaction, but what are the amends really about? They're not about us at all. They're about the other person. They are a gift that we give that hopefully will do its job of removing their roadblocks to forgiving us. That's what we're trying to do with the amends. We put something in place in them through our harm that still is causing them the unfreedom, the captivity of their own victimization, of their resentments, of their anger. If we can do anything to remove the obstacles for them to be able to cross over to their own forgiveness, that's the gift that we're trying to give. This is the process of shalom. And so the question becomes, are you ready? Are you willing to do what shalom actually requires? One last quick reading. One of my favorites from John 5, starting in verse 2. This is the famous story of the man who was infirm for 38 years at the pool. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" That's the question, isn't it? Do you want to be healed? Seems like a no-brainer. What's your response? Well, yeah, you think, right? But what does he say? The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am going, another steps down before me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, your pallet, and walk." That's the key line. Do you want to be well? Do you wish to be well? He can't say yes because he's living in the victimhood. It's always somebody else's fault. He can't get in the water because there's no one there to help him. But he's been in isolation for 38 years, obviously, because he's got no one there to help him. He's got no family. He's got no friends. Contrast that with the man who is lowered down through a hole in the roof on a pallet to Jesus because he couldn't get in the front door. He had friends. He had connection. And Jesus says to him, your sins are forgiven. Well, they already were because he's already connected. He's already free. But this man can't even say yes to the simple question. Do you want to be healed? What does want mean in Aramaic? And we've gone over this before too. Sebiana. Do you wish? Do you want to be healed? It is the word that is used for will, for God's will. God's will is God's sebiana, which doesn't mean just this ironclad juggernaut, this iron will that bulldozes everything in front of it. What sebiana actually means is desire, delight, pleasure, deepest purpose, all of those things put together. Sebiana is the road to shalom. See how related that they are? What Jesus is actually asking this man, is it your deepest desire? Is it your purpose in life to end your isolation? That's what he's asking. Is it your desire, is it your deepest purpose to begin living shalom in your life? And so he's asking us the same question. Are we ready not to be victims anymore? Are we ready to stop blaming others for what we have to release in ourselves and are the only ones who can release this in ourselves? Are we ready to forgive, free ourselves? Are we ready to be forgiven, accept graciously what others are trying to gift us with? In other words, are we ready to offer and to accept freedom? Are we ready to pick up our pallet and simply walk? Imagine Jesus in this situation, asking this man, do you wish to be well? Imagine Jesus standing in front of you asking the same question. And as we go through all the permutations that we go through, he's just standing there patiently waiting for an answer. Can you just see him doing that? As this man is going through everything that he's objecting to and all the story, and Jesus just patiently waiting for an answer. He's waiting for our answer just as well. No man and no woman is an island, entire in itself. We are connected. We live in the ripples of each other's shalom or hataha, their wholeness or their chaos. That's the human condition. Since the moment you drew your first breath to the moment that you draw your last, that is your living condition. We are living in the ripples, the effects of each other's shalom and hataha. Jesus is asking us right now if we are ready, entirely ready, to be willing, to desire more than we fear, to begin the end of our isolation, to stand at the beginning of shalom. Are we entirely ready to do that? You know when we will know for sure when we are entirely ready? It's when we pick up our pallet and we walk, and not a moment before. Let's pray. Father, we want to get to that point. We want to get to that point where we are entirely ready to pick up our pallet and walk, where we can say with no reservation, yes, my deepest purpose in life is to be well, is to be healed, to end the isolation that I continue to create for myself, and to begin living in the wholeness of shalom. If there's anything in us that is keeping us from that affirmation, from the clarity of a moment like that, help us to work through it in whatever way we need to. Take the small steps that we need to take until we are standing at the precipice of the big one. That's what we need, Lord. And that's what we truly want. Even if we're too afraid to act now, help us to be ready by tomorrow or the day after. This is our prayer, Lord. We want to have nothing in between us and you and us and each other. We want our love to be complete because we want to glorify you. Thank you, Father. Thank you for everything that you do to support us. Never let us forget we can only love because you loved us first. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's all stand.